You know, the people here in Massachusetts, within this Commonwealth, they really deserve a government that respects their tax dollars, respects their time, honors their trust, and operates with some levels of accountability and transparency. That accountability and transparency should always come from the top down. It should trickle down into the residents. However, there was just an explosive report released today by the state auditor, Diana DeZoglio, and it shows that under Governor Maura Healey's administration, any levels of trust seems to be violated, if any, if there was any at all, right? Let me explain. So she audited the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. And for the sake of this video and the length of this video, I'll just call them EOHLC for short. They are the ones responsible for managing the state's emergency shelter systems. But they seem to have squandered millions of taxpayer dollars through different channels and levels of mismanagement, improper contracts, and with a complete disregard for any established financial safeguards. This is not speculation. This is complete and absolute fact. And it's supported by the 100-page document that I just went over of absolutely meticulous auditing. As a matter of fact, I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to check out the report for yourself. But I'm going to give you the nitty-gritty of this right here, right now. And here's what happened. Between July of 21 and June of 24, EOHLC, what they did was they used emergency no-bid contracts to the tune of nearly $14 million. These contracts originally were supposed to be a temporary solution to an unexpected crisis. Of course, you could say, well, expected or unexpected, this is what happened, and it happened under the Biden administration. Let's just call it what it is. So the audit, what they showed was that there was an increase in demand for shelter services, and that was well documented by early 2023. However, the Healey administration waited until August of that year to act when the crisis was already completely out of hand and out of control. Now, this delay, what this did was it allowed them to exploit emergency government laws that are intended for short-term unforeseen events. These aren't for like prolonged, unforeseeable future challenges, right? So what that did was it created this level of misuse of emergency authority, which undermined competitive bidding. It cost the public, obviously, even more money than it should have, and they buried any possibility of fairness or transparency in the contracting process. So let me be clear here for a second. Emergency contracts, as I said a little bit earlier, they're not meant to last for months upon months upon months. What they are supposed to do is buy time or create a, let's call it a stopgap, where the formal procurement process would take place. But what Healey did is they extended these contracts far beyond what is maybe legally, but definitely ethically acceptable. One no-bid contract was awarded to Spinelli Ravioli Manufacturing Company for food services totaling over $9 million and spanning over the course of 8 months. Another contract with Mercedes Cab Company, which was rebranded as Pilgrim Transit. The contract was originally around $2.8 million. That ballooned to $4.7 million after there was multiple extensions and amendments to said contract. The Healey administration really had every opportunity to switch to competitive bidding, but it chose not to. She chose not to. Why? Well, let's talk about that. You know, it's really not even incompetence at this point. I feel like this is deliberate, and it's a deliberate avoidance of any levels of oversight. The audit details egregious overpayments, financial waste, and if you look at the document that I'm going to link, if you look at the Spinelli contract alone, 9.6% of food deliveries were overbilled. And when you're dealing with a lot of money, 9.6% is a lot, right? And EOHLC, they paid above the agreed rates, often without verifying invoices or trying to get back some of these charges. They didn't even go back to these companies and say, hey, look, you overcharged us for this. Also, the auditors found that the EOHLC didn't even consider a, let's say, flat rate pricing proposal from Spinelli that could have saved the state a significant amount of money. There was no documentation, there was no analysis, there was just silence, and the result is taxpayers footed a higher bill for services that could have cost us potentially less. You know, think about it. In a time when Massachusetts families are struggling to afford groceries, struggling to afford rent, struggling to afford utilities and basic health care, this kind of mismanagement is more than neglect. It's really a slap in the face, guys. That's what it is. I'll call it like it is. Take a look at the Mercedes Cab Company contract. This contract literally reads like a parody of government waste. The average cost, you're not going to believe this, the average cost per ride under this contract was $155 at a rate of $10.01 per mile, which exceeds standard taxi fares. The audit also uncovered a charge of around $146 for a 1-mile trip that would have cost around $5 with the Boston cab. Another ride for 55 individuals traveling to a healthcare facility right down the road, you could probably spit and hit the damn thing, cost the state a whopping $4,651. It's ridiculous. That's what it is. There were also these no-shows and cancellations that were charged at high rates as well, meaning that people went to go pick somebody up and they weren't there, and they still got billed upwards of $150 to $350. However, the big issue here is that there was apparently no verification system in place to somewhat ensure that these rides even occurred in the first place, meaning the company could have been billing and there was no ride delivered. This is not a case of poor planning. It's unchecked financial abuse happening under the watch of the governor's office. The EOHLC also broke the rules when it came to shelter contracts, with the agency violating terms of its agreement with another company called SKS Management. And what they did was they allowed subcontractors to operate without written approval, which I think could be a direct breach of the contract. So what I mean is this: the lack of documentation could imply that no one knows if the services paid for were even delivered. And yet the checks went out. That's what happened. Meanwhile, payments to other shelter providers often did not match the contractual terms. So in reality, it seems like EOHLC paid out a lot of money without verifying what it was paying for. And the people responsible for ensuring that, let's say, taxpayer money was spent wisely, abandon that responsibility entirely. That is completely out of the door here, right? Also, you know, I think of it this way. In my opinion, right, this audit, this is like a warning shot, and it tells a story of a state agency running wild without any levels of oversight. And the governor, who either didn't notice or didn't care, that's really what happened here. I don't know if she didn't notice or didn't care. It's one of the two or a mixture of the two. And I think that the audit makes it clear that there was no legal basis for bypassing procurement laws. But forget about what's legal here for a second, guys. Think about what is ethical. Because what happened under Governor Maura Healey's watch wasn't just a legal failure. It's a moral failure as well. And her administration probably layered so much red tape, so much bureaucratic shielding, and some procedural fog, if you want to call it that, over the system, that holding anybody accountable becomes nearly impossible. Meaning they put up these like bureaucratic roadblocks, right, on purpose, so that they are not accountable, right? You can't dig far enough to the point where something becomes legal and or illegal because of all this stuff they did in its place, so that doesn't happen. That's what I mean here. It's like legal loopholes, and these legal loopholes should never be a substitute for ethical leadership. And Massachusetts, you know this. It deserves better. We deserve better than this. And you can't tell me that the Healey administration couldn't have planned for the rising demand in early 2023. They had the data, they had the time, and they had the responsibility to act on this. But they waited until the situation turned into a full-blown chaotic emergency. Then they used that self-inflicted crisis as an excuse to hand out no-bid contracts without competition or scrutiny. I've been saying this for months, guys. I've been saying it for months. There is corruption happening at these emergency shelter systems, and it goes beyond this, right? Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about no-bid contracts. I'll tell you this story. Look, I was a contractor for 10 years before I started my real estate business. You know who gets no bid contracts? Friends. You know who also gets no bid contracts? Political donors. That's who gets no bid contracts. So put 2 and 2 together here, guys. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. I'm willing to bet if we were to dig deeper into this and look at the Office of Campaign Finances, there's a much larger story here. And one hand, think about it this way. You know, you're handing out no bid contracts. You could think of it like this. One hand is allegedly handing out contracts. The other hand is returning the favor. It's the textbook definition of quid pro quo. We have like a fox guarding the henhouse situation here. That's what I think is happening. And you know what else I think? Look at the 72% approved Massachusetts voter audit. Everybody, the majority of the state is supporting this ballot measure to authorize the state auditor to conduct a comprehensive audit of the state legislature. This is not something out of the realm of things that have happened before in the past. So why has the audit not happened? Why not? I think it's pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear here that the political classes in this state fear what it would uncover. Think of the audit of the emergency shelter system as a sneak preview. It shows what happens when powerful state agencies operate without transparency and accountability, which in turn could also show why they are fighting so damn hard to avoid the 72% approved audit that people voted for and demanded. It's unbelievable. You know, when public officials exploit emergency laws to award lucrative contracts without competition, they are not serving the people. They are serving themselves. This is my opinion. When they fail to document basic procurement procedures, right, or basic procurement decisions, they are not acting in good faith. They are hiding. When they overpay for food, for rides, and shelter with your money, they are not protecting the vulnerable. They are betraying the public they were originally enshrined to support. Look at it this way. Maura Healey, when she was campaigning, go back into the records. Go back. The internet lives on forever. Nothing, you cannot hide from the internet. She campaigned on integrity, transparency, and good governance, right? That's what she campaigned on. But this is what you received. This is what you voted for. Under her administration, millions upon millions of dollars to this day are being spent recklessly. Why do you think the emergency shelter system is ending 6 months early? We knew about this weeks ago. I showed you pictures of what was posted on the doors. It had the paper of when they needed to be out. It was like June 30th. Then it had the documentations into the system I told you was going to take over, which is Homebase. So they're being, they're being taken out of the shelter because it's costing too much money. That's what the problem is. More so, what do you think would have happened if even more people came here? What do you think would have happened? Think of it this way. If the shelter system is buckling under the current demand, imagine the chaos with another surge of people. Imagine the chaos with more money being spent, no competitive bidding, inflated contracts, zero oversight. We wouldn't just be talking about wasted millions of dollars. We'd be facing a total collapse of services. And then when that happens, it's not just the budget that fails, it's the people in this state. The people that are in a real need who pay the price. That's who it falls on. The people at the top don't see these things like we do. They're not affected like we are. This is a systematic breakdown of financial mismanagement that has cost the taxpayers of this Commonwealth dearly. You know, if you guys want a better future, really, if you want a better future for Massachusetts, you can't ignore these failures. We can't let those in power rewrite the rules, conceal their actions, and dismiss legitimate oversight. We can't allow the 72% voter-approved audit to remain on the shelf while our government continues to operate in the dark. The people of this Commonwealth, they deserve honesty. They don't deserve excuses. And they deserve leadership that respects every dollar that they contribute. Not someone that seems to be treating their money like a blank check and just writing them out to whomever they deem notable, right? Or that's it, right? You know, the more and more I cover these topics, the more I realize that Massachusetts originally prided itself on these progressive values, on justice, and on fairness. But what's fair, right? This is not fair. The values that they had, they need to maintain those values. And again, those values need to start at the top and make their way to the bottom. This is not what fair looks like. They need to go back to the drawing board and apply how we manage our resources, how we serve the most vulnerable, and how we hold our leaders accountable. By the way, remember, the findings of this audit, this is not a partisan issue here. This is a public issue here. This has nothing to do with the left or the right. It's a matter of what's on record. And this should be a call to action for every single person in this Commonwealth who believes in transparent, responsible, and honest to goodness governance. That's what this means. And I'll tell you this much. The waste exposed in this audit is just the beginning. This is like the tip of the iceberg, okay? This is the tip of the iceberg here. And it's time for accountability. Massachusetts deserves better than this. And no one should be looking the other way. We spend so much money to live in this state. It costs us so much money to do anything in this state. At the very least, what they should do with the money that it's costing us is be responsible. And I don't think that is too much to ask. All right, guys, I told you this was happening. I told you this was going to happen. That's it for today's video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.